There's a classic Jewish tale about a man who's given the opportunity to see both heaven and hell. So first he goes to hell, and there he sees this beautifully set table with people all around it. And instead of hands, they have giant ladles, giant spoons for hands, and they're trying to feed themselves, but they can't bend their arms, so they're reaching across the table, trying to pour food down their gullet, and it's getting all over the place. Man says, "Enough already! Please take me to Shemaim, take me to heaven." There he goes to heaven. And he sees again the exact same table, beautifully set with food, and again people with giant spoons, ladles instead of hands. But here's the difference. When they scoop up the food, instead of trying to feed themselves, they're reaching across the table so they don't have to bend their arms and feeding everyone else. Every single person is feeding someone else, and by doing that, everybody is getting fed. And that's the key thing here. If one person is selfish and doesn't focus on the rest of the group, then the whole thing falls apart. One other person won't get fed. They'll be starving. They'll need to focus on themselves. It requires every single person to be selfless and focus on others. And I want to connect this to a topic I usually don't bring up, which is 18th century German philosophy. One of the most famous philosophers, Immanuel Kant, and we can debate about what was good about his philosophy, what wasn't, etc. But he had this incredible idea called the categorical imperative. And the idea behind this is that there are certain absolute rules that all of us must do all the time for society to thrive, to be a better world. For example, if I'm walking out on the street and I see a piece of trash and think, oh, I don't have time, I have to get somewhere, someone else will pick it up. Guess what? Everybody else is going to say, someone else will pick it up, and that piece of trash is going to sit there and build up and up. This is why littering is such a big problem in the world. But again, that basic idea, if I think only about myself, ultimately, everyone else is going to think about themselves, no one will help each other, and it's all going to come back to attack us in the end. Now, I'm going to try and connect this to our Parsha in a peculiar way. In this week's Parsha of Nasso, there's one of the most troubling, painful, and difficult passages in the whole Torah to understand, which is the Sota. This is a man who believes that his wife is cheating on him. Now that is painful in and of itself because adultery is a real thing, both men cheating on their wives and wives cheating on their men. But here the power structure is completely unbalanced because the husband can bring the wife before the Kohen, before the priest, and make her go through this painful ceremony where she drinks a special document, and if she's guilty, she'll die. If she's innocent, she'll be blessed with a child. But who would want to have a child with a man who's accused you of cheating and put you through the ceremony? This is very difficult to understand, but the place that it is found is also very peculiar because the beginning of Bamidbar has all these sections about the Israelites, about counting, etc. like that, and the Sota seems to be completely out of place. In fact, the section right before is about the Kohanim and the gifts that the regular Israelites, we give them, the Maaser and the Truma. We give a certain percentage of our crops to the Kohanim to support them in the work that they do. What does this have to do with anything? How are they connected? The suggestion is made by Rabbi Yochanan, who asked the question, again, why is the Sota right next to Maaser and Truma? And he says that any person who does not give Maaser and Truma, who doesn't give these gifts to the Kohanim, one day, by not supporting the Kohanim, eventually is going to be dependent on the Kohanim, specifically when? In the Sota ceremony. And you're like, wait, what's going on here? Because I didn't fulfill the mitzvah of giving essentially a kind of charity to support the Kohanim, my wife is going to cheat on me? Now, I'm not going to dig in deeper to the understanding of Rabbi Yochanan and the text he brings in, but I want to suggest something else that connects with the earlier story, which is this. If we live in a world where every single person is utterly selfish, and they never go out of their way to think about others, the reality is that we're going to live in a world where people are cheating on each other, where people are betraying each other. We're going to live in a world that is progressively worse and worse and worse. Living in this world where nobody's looking out for anybody else. Ultimately, we're going to get in a point where when all we want to do is take care of ourselves, we won't be able to anymore. We'll run out of resources. We'll become weak, and we'll be relying on everybody else. But guess what? There'll be nobody else to help us. The whole world falls apart in that way. So while the categorical imperative doesn't leave any room for exceptions, there's still a beautiful notion there, and in the story I started with, and in this teaching in the Talmud, and perhaps a hint from our parasha, the message then from our parasha perhaps could be that at the point at which a husband needs to accuse his wife, It's not about that specific infidelity. It is that he has allowed his marriage to fail so miserably. He has made so many mistakes, and perhaps she has as well, that the sota ceremony, which is so painful, is the least of their worries. They have been so selfish, not looking at each other. They've allowed it to get to this point. And when we look around us in the world and we think about all those little things that we say, oh, someone else will take care of it. It's not a big deal. How far will it go before it becomes a big deal? Before we can no longer look out for ourselves because the world that we have ignored for so long has fallen apart. And the only way to prevent that is to reach out our hands and to help others. And by doing that, we can help prevent some of these horrible breakdowns in relationships and society. Think about that for one moment. What's one small thing that you could do? And if everybody else did it, this world would be a much better place. But guess what? It starts with you. With that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and be well.